Films in Focus with David Sterritt is underwritten by The Movie House, your destination for first-run Hollywood and independent movies, and a digital portal to the Met Opera, National Theatre Live, and special events worldwide in Millerton, New York, and on the web, themoviehouse.net.
David Sterritt is the editor-in-chief of the Quarterly Review of Film and Video, contributing writer at Cineast, film professor at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and Robin Hood Radio's very own critic and guide to all things cinematic, one of my favorite words. He joins us weekly. The films Shiva Baby, Keep an Eye Out, and Better Days. Over to you, CB.
Cinematic used to be one of my favorite words until I got into this line of work too. That was many a long decade ago. Let's not get into that.
Days of yore.
Well, our three films this week have almost nothing in common with each other, except that all are basically all they come from different countries. Even Shiva Baby, which takes place very much in the New York area, is actually an American-Canadian production, but that just has to do with the kind of money that went into making it. It is by a new filmmaker named Emma Seligman, who both wrote and directed it, and as the title may suggest, Shiva Baby deals very much with Jewish characters. Shiva, in this case, is not a Hindu god. It is a part of Jewish funerary ritual. And what we have here, pretty much the whole movie takes place in the immediate aftermath of a funeral. And the people who are assembled in this house have just attended the funeral, except for our main character, whose name is Danielle. She did not go to the funeral because she was busy plying her trade. And although her parents think that her trade is well, she goes to college. Her parents think that her trade is a babysitter, because that's what she's told everybody and what she's made everybody believe, and what she claims her trade is actually being a sort of a hooker. She has sex with guys, and she picks up money for this, and that's basically how she supports herself, even though she's a nice young woman and she, does go to college and all of that. So she has not gone to the funeral because she was, as I said, busy plying her trade. But now she shows up at the funeral and she really has no idea what's going on. And she knows some of these people, and some of the people she doesn't know. It's very, very crowded. Lots and lots of people, including her parents and all sorts of others, and including eventually the man who she was just with. So sort of a comic situation. And this is indeed a comic film. One of the other people who was present at this gathering is a former girlfriend of hers who she has a great rivalry with. The former girlfriend is now going to law school, which is what Danielle is supposed to do in her immediate future. And again, this is what her parents want for her, and this is what. But anyway, so that's another complication, is that this former girlfriend named Maya is also there, and Maya and Danielle has a very, very fraught relationship, and there's a lot of just rivalry and jealousy going on between the two of them, and all of this is going on as people circulate around this house with this jammed up with so many people, really old people, really young people, and that's what it's all about. So, Shiva Baby is an amusing little movie. It's nicely acted. It has some very colorful characters, but it never really caught fire for me. The best thing about it, actually, is that it's under an hour and a half long, so it doesn't take too terribly long to look at. And if people enjoy this sort of movie, they'll have a nice time with it. But a couple of things about it bothered me. First of all, I was never really captivated by the main character, Danielle. She's, an interesting young woman, but not that interesting. And of course, ordinariness is supposed to be one of her qualities, but I found her ordinariness a bit too ordinary to really capture my attention. Also, as cinema, the movie really is very imitative. There's a while deep into the film when it really turns into a Fellini movie. And anybody who's ever seen a Federico Fellini film with all these close-ups of grotesque faces, and it's a perfectly appropriate thing to happen in this movie at certain points, but it's just so imitative. There's another point where it just totally imitates Woody Allen, the old Woody Allen from Annie Hall. And I found these moments not so much interesting little homages where you can enjoy spotting the references, but really just sort of imitating because the filmmaker didn't have enough real ideas of her own. So Shiva Baby is a likable enough little movie, but it just never really caught my attention. If you're interested in a whole lot of Jewish characters sort of acting out Jewish stereotypes in a big crowded house for an hour and a half, then you'll have a good time with it. But I found it it never quite caught my fancy. Second movie I want to talk about today, Keep an Eye Out, very much caught my fancy. And then this is a French-Belgian production. It's in French, and it is made by a very quirky director named Quentin Dupieux. His most recent film before this was a movie called Deerskin, also exceedingly quirky. The French title of Keep an Eye Out is Au Poste, but Keep an Eye Out is really a good title for it because, well, it's a comedy, and it's a very absurd comedy, deliberately so. And one of the characters, in fact, only has one eye. So Keep an Eye Out is a very dark sort of pun on this circumstance in the movie. But nothing about the film is predictable. I just found it really quite enjoyable to watch. And again, it's well under an hour and a half long. So that's a quality of two of our films this week. They don't take too much time to watch, but I really had a good time with Keep an Eye Out. So here we have a movie that takes place not entirely, but mostly in an office at a police station where a man is being interrogated. This man came upon a body, a corpse, lying on the pavement outside the building where he lives, and he summoned the police by making an emergency call, and the police came, but they immediately arrested the man who phoned them up because, among other things, the person was dying, who died from a terrible wound in the head, and the person who called the police was standing next to him with an iron in his hand. So, maybe he killed this person with an iron and then called the police to fend off suspicion from himself. Anyway, he is now at the police station and he is being questioned, and most of the movie is this interrogation. But it's unlike any real interrogation you've ever seen before, and one of the reasons for this is that the inspector who is conducting the interrogation, his name is Bourron. He is played by Benoit Poelvoorde, who is a marvelous Belgian actor who I got to know many, many years ago. He was one of the three people who wrote, directed, and starred in a very, very dark comedy many, many years ago, back around 1990, called Man Bites Dog, where he played a serial killer, and it's a phenomenal performance. And if you ever want to see a pitch dark comedy, that's definitely one to catch up with. Well, now he's a lot older, as are we all, and he plays the commissioner who is doing the interrogation in this film, and he's a really funny actor, and he's never funny in over-the-top ways. He's funny in subtle and interesting and mild ways, but it just gets across the humor and, again, the absurdity of it, because whatever else this movie is, it is very, very, it's an absurdist comedy. But again, the absurdity is done subtly and quietly. It is never an in-your-face kind of a movie. So we have things like, again, there's a character with only one eye, and he is another police officer who is there, and he enters into the action, but not for very long, and then something really unexpected happens to him. And then we have some flashbacks to the death itself, the way the person died, how the other main character happened to be standing next to him with an iron in his hand, and things like this. And we get little solutions to these mysteries, although then other mysteries open up. For one thing, it turns out that the person who is being interrogated, his name is Fugain, he came downstairs from his building not just once to find the body, but 7 times. And the movie is basically following the structure of these 7 going downstairs and then going back upstairs. And so it's a very orderly movie in a way, but this is just there to really set off the basic absurdity of the whole thing. When we finally get the solution to how the person died, it turns out to be something you never could have expected, and something in keeping with the overall tone of the movie, which is very bizarre. So, again, the movie is very, very quiet, very, very subtle in its humor. It had me, I have to confess, sort of hopelessly giggling all the way through, and I'm really not sure why. I was thinking about it while I was doing it. This isn't hilarious. It's just somehow funny, and the movie just kept on being that. So again, if you want a quiet, absurd, sort of grotesque but never in your face kind of a comedy, this is absolutely a little movie to catch up with. I think that the filmmaker Quentin Dupieux is a very, very gifted and very, very unusual talent. And well, Keep an Eye Out is really one of the most interesting movies that I've seen in quite a while. I really had a good time watching it. Among other things, it's a real lesson in how to create constant surprise and even a sort of suspense with a movie that takes place mainly in one room. Final movie for today, and again, our previous two films, Shiva Baby and Keep an Eye Out, have both been pretty much comedies. Better Days, our final movie, is not a comedy at all. This is a China-Hong Kong co-production, and it is one of the movies that is nominated right now for the Best International Film Academy Award. And it was made by Derek Kwok-chung-tsang, and it is a very, very somber movie about a really important and very dark subject. It's basically a movie about school bullying. And in this case, we have a pretty long movie. It's well over 2 hours long, and it really gets into this topic. And so, again, there's a lot of darkness in this movie, but it's about a very real-world topic that a lot of people are very concerned about for very good reason. And I must say that for a movie that comes to us out of China, it just struck so many current American concerns right on the nail on the head, that it's very striking for that, among other reasons. So the movie begins with a suicide. A high school student has committed suicide, and her best friend is absolutely shocked by this. And this is the first thing that happens in the movie. So if you don't want a movie that gets into this sort of territory, then Better Days is a movie to stay away from. But if you're interested in exploring this sort of material, Better Days does it. A very reasonable and responsible job of it. In any case, the student has committed suicide, and her best friend, whose name is Chen Yan, is really, really shocked and horrified by this. And then little by little, we find out some of what is going on here. It is now this period when literally millions of Chinese high school students are about to take the big exam that will determine not just if they get into college or university, but what kind of college or university they will get into, if they get into any at all. And this will, of course, have profound effects on their entire future lives. This is a system that we do not have in the United States, although quite a number of other countries do have it. But in China, it's very real. So Chen Yan is getting ready to take this exam, this hugely important exam, which will stretch over a couple of days. And now she is horrified by the fact that her closest friend has just committed suicide. Interestingly, Chen Yan is a sensationally good student. She is doing really, really well in school. She is doing really, really well with her preparations for the big exam. And in fact, she manages to stay focused even after the horrifying suicide of her best friend. So if you were expecting a movie about a young woman who's overwhelmed by horror just at this important moment in her life, that is not the case. She manages to stay on track and continue preparing for the exam, and we have high hopes for how it will all come out. The trouble is that she also is being bullied. She is being bullied very badly by some of her fellow students, nasty girls, mean girls, who are just constantly after her and doing bad things to her and playing mean, nasty pranks on her, and this is very distracting for her. Then a young man comes into her life. His name is Xiao Bei, and he, for some reason, decides to become her protector. And he is there for, and by the way, he is no admirable young man. He's a very scruffy, sort of ne'er-do-well type. But somehow he comes into her life, and somehow he sort of protects her, and somehow he's around there for her, at least some of the time. And she starts to rely on him, although it's not clear that he is really all that reliable, even though he does seem to be there for her at least some of the times when she really needs him. So that's basically what's going on in this very long movie. We have this young woman who is remaining focused on her task of passing the exam, and her mother, by the way, who is working in a factory a long, long distance away, is also very concerned in this, and we see her occasionally in the movie, and she doesn't realize the extra hurdles that Chen Yan is facing along the way. She is just desperately hoping that her daughter will do well in this exam. But again, Chen Yan is doing well about that, but can she continue to do well? Can she continue to stay focused with all of these distracting things, the suicide of her friend, her own being bullied, and then her getting involved in, actually, she goes to the authorities, and she says, you've got to help me. These girls are doing things to me, but there's just so much the authorities can do, and it's not very much. And that is what Better Days is about. The title is, to some extent, very ironic. Again, I was very struck by how close this movie is to concerns that we have right here in the United States, and I was also interested in something else about the Chinese ambiance of the movie. The movie gets in its own little criticisms of Chinese culture, the way there is constant surveillance of everything, the way people are always keeping an eye on other people, the way there is video footage of the streets and everything else that can be used, but the way that all of this tremendous surveillance and this tremendous sort of Big Brother another eye on everything doesn't prevent awful things from happening, like the bullying of Chen Yang and so forth. So very, very interesting in that way. The movie ultimately becomes too much of a public service announcement for my taste. It ultimately becomes a really big sort of, look out everybody, bullying is real and we have to take care of these things and we have to look after our young people. And all of that is very true and very important. But the movie at times gets preachy, almost propagandistic about this. That said, it's a very absorbing drama. And when it's not sort of going into its preachy mode, I found it very, very absorbing and certainly held my attention, and it's got a whole lot of very effective melodrama in it. So Better Days, not a great film. I don't think it's quite of Academy Award quality, but then again, a lot of movies that get Academy Awards are not of Academy Award quality in my opinion. It certainly is a very ambitious and a very timely and a very internationally relevant drama, and I think it's well worth looking at by anybody concerned with problems like the difficulties faced by young people, especially when there is bullying going on in the air. So that, Jill, is my very international story this week.
And we thank you, as we always do, David Sterritt. Films in Focus, the films Shiva Baby, Keep an Eye Out, and Better Days.